Dopamine, the celebrity hormone as some call it. When you hear the word dopamine, what comes to your mind is the brain's center of pleasure and ecstasy. In some regard, it is thought of as the brain's heaven. Truly, dopamine has been elevated to a sort of celebrity status. It is probably the most well-known neurotransmitter in the body. Many know it not only as the brain's pleasure center, but also as the ultimate driver of addictions. The way this neurotransmitter is perceived in some quarters, it is viewed as an inherently bad hormone, the seed of all things lustful and sinful, and as such, all effort should be put in place to limit its production. Despite its popularity, not many people understand what dopamine is, what it does, and how it works. So aside from the fables and the myths, what exactly is dopamine? Dopamine is a vital neurotransmitter produced by your body, and being a neurotransmitter, naturally the nervous system uses it to send messages between the nerves of the cells across the body. Because of this, it is sometimes called the chemical messenger. One aspect of dopamine that is well known is the role that it plays in how we experience pleasure. When we feel good about something, our brain releases dopamine. This happens when we eat, when we dance, exercise, or when our favorite sports team is flying high. Because of this, for a long time, dopamine was viewed in a rather simplistic way as the neurotransmitter for pleasure only. However, further research showed something rather interesting. Researchers realized that dopamine levels do not only spike when a person feels pleasure. More specifically, they noticed dopamine spikes in the brain during moments of high stress. For instance, it was discovered that when soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorders heard gunfire, dopamine levels in the brain increased rapidly. Certainly, that wasn't a pleasurable situation. With this discovery, researchers began to reconsider their rather narrow view of dopamine. In another study, scientists mapped the brains of people you could describe as go-getters, and compared them to those you could describe as slackers, those with an I don't care attitude. What the scientists discovered was that people who had a habit of working harder had higher levels of dopamine in the striatum and prefrontal cortex. These are two areas known to impact motivation and reward. However, amongst the slackers, dopamine was found in the anterior insula, a part of the brain that is involved in emotion and risk perception. This study, amongst many others done over the years, has fleshed out the comprehensive role of dopamine in the brain. This neurotransmitter is more than just a pleasure hormone. It affects so many parts of our behavior and physical functions, including motivation, learning, heart rate, sleep, mood, kidney function, attention, movement, lactation in women, blood vessel functions, and several other body functions. Dopamine plays a big part in our ability to think and plan. This neurotransmitter helps us to strive, stay motivated, and maintain an interest in things. In a summary of what dopamine actually does in our bodies, one researcher from the University of Connecticut, John Salamone, said this about dopamine. Low levels of dopamine make people and other animals less likely to work for things, so it has more to do with motivation and cost-benefit analyses than pleasure itself. It is now clear that there is a wrong emphasis on the role of dopamine as just the pleasure center of the body. Yes, it does play a role in how we experience pleasure, but not in the way we think it does. Rather, the primary role of dopamine is to motivate us. Dopamine is not a reaction to rewards, as many people think it is. Instead, it encourages us to seek rewards. Here's exactly how dopamine works, without having to go into the details of neuroscience jargon. Let's say you taste a delicious cupcake. This leads to a pleasurable feeling. When this happens, the body releases dopamine to inspire you to act and obtain that reward again. When you act again to have another taste of the delicious cupcake, you'll experience another spike of dopamine. What dopamine really does is inspire you to keep doing activities that you find rewarding. In reality, dopamine does the bulk of its work before you feel that pleasure or sense of satisfaction. In fact, it is better described as the motivation neurotransmitter. Dopamine tells your brain, hey, this thing that you've just done is highly rewarding, you should go for it again. While this role of dopamine sounds really impressive, there is a side that is not so pretty. And to understand this, we have to talk about a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. Dopamine is not exclusive to humans. It is also present in animals. But while animals will always be driven by their basal instincts for the pleasure of reward, which defines what we all refer to as their animalistic behavior, what sets us apart from them with respect to the control of our drive for pleasure is the prefrontal cortex. While the brain's reward center, which dopamine is a part of, is responsible for creating those desire and drive for rewards, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for putting the brake on those cravings when it is needed. When the prefrontal cortex isn't operating as it should, this is when addiction sets in. The brain's reward and pleasure center run into overdrive. It rules your behavior, causing you, for example, to eat more, drink more, watch more bad videos, and take more psychoactive drugs. Your reward center keeps pushing you to enjoy more pleasure, leading to an increase in dopamine levels. In such a case, this becomes unhealthy. Our decision-making abilities become impaired. We lose control of our impulses, and we begin to tend towards animalistic behavior. What ought to be for us a channel of motivation to lead successful and fulfilling lives begins to rule and destroy our lives. This is why some life coaches have publicized the concept of dopamine detox. The aim of dopamine detox is to detach yourself from the everyday stimuli that induce the production of dopamine. These stimuli include sugar, social media, drugs, shopping, and bad videos amongst others. Dr. Cameron Sepa is the person behind the idea of the dopamine detox. His goal is to rid his clients of their dependence on various dopamine stimuli. Many of his clients are tech workers and venture capitalists located in Silicon Valley. Thanks to his high-profile clients, Sepa's dopamine detox has gained some popularity. However, many don't really understand the concept behind a dopamine detox. While Sepa's clinical invention is carefully based on cognitive behavioral therapy, many have reduced it to simply trying to get bored or lonely. But Dr. Sepa is more specific about the targeted dopamine stimuli in his detox program. He has identified compulsive behaviors that are targeted for dopamine detox. These behaviors are emotional eating, excessive internet usage and gaming, gambling and shopping, thrill and novelty seeking, recreational drugs, and bad videos. With dopamine detox, as practitioners fast from these compulsive activities that normally trigger the brain's neurotransmitters, they become less dependent on the emotional pleasure hits that induce the production of dopamine. One of the more interesting compulsive behavior targeted by dopamine detox are bad videos. In one interesting study, researchers working with a group of volunteers discovered something rather interesting about bad video addiction. The group of volunteers of people who were addicted to the videos were split in two. In one group, the volunteers were asked to abstain from their videos for 2 weeks, while in the other group, the participants were asked to abstain from their favorite food. After the test period, the researchers discovered that the only improvement in the scores used to measure their ability to appreciate long-term rewards was observed in those asked to abstain from the videos. Even though both groups of participants were asked to exercise self-control, the results give credence to a simple conclusion, which is that the real problem for the volunteers addicted to the videos was not self-control, but rather the videos itself. It shows that the videos does not only create a loop of excessive desires, as dopamine is produced at high levels, but it also inhibits our ability to keep our cravings in check, as it hampers the effectiveness of the prefrontal cortex. Notice that Dr. Sepa's dopamine detox program does not include reproduction as one of the compulsive behaviors that should be targeted. This points to the fact that rather than derive pleasure from videos, contrary to what many online blogs and articles would say, it's healthier to derive it from reproduction alone. Although there is some contention about the scientific validity of dopamine detox, it does give some promise in helping addicts break their addictions. That said, the idea of dopamine detox is not to completely rid the body of dopamine production. In a healthy human being, this won't be possible anyway, as dopamine is needed for very important body functions. Producing too much or too little dopamine can lead to serious health issues like Parkinson's disease and some other less serious medical conditions. With that in mind, the body needs to produce moderate levels of dopamine for healthy body functions. Now that we know that dopamine is more accurately described as the motivation neurotransmitter, we can take advantage of dopamine to boost our levels of motivation. There are several ways to boost the production of dopamine for the right activities. And as you might have suspected, exercise is one of them. more precisely aerobic exercises, as these help to boost your heart rate. Another important thing when it comes to increasing dopamine levels is to get quality sleep. Researchers have discovered that lack of sleep could inhibit dopamine transmission. Sharing your success also helps to boost your dopamine levels. That recognition from your boss for a job well done will induce the release of dopamine in the brain. Also, sharing your achievements with your colleagues or family members is a good way to improve dopamine levels. More than just playing a role in the reward center of your brain, dopamine is the key to improving your personal motivation. Although the neurotransmitter has received a bad rap for being involved in the development of addictive habits, it can and should be channeled into living a successful and fulfilling life. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel as well if you enjoy content like this. Till we come your way with more interesting and informative videos. Thanks for watching and have a great time.